So I have been coming to TechServe Alliance probably for about 10 years. So I have to say I've enjoyed every session, every party that I've attended. So speaking about parties, I hear last night was a phenomenal success, and I appreciate that all of you have even made it in this morning. So now let's talk a little bit about, we say, TechServe Alliance and everybody that's in this room. I have to say you are the luckiest people in the world. You're the most important people in the world. So now you're probably wondering, what did she have for breakfast for saying this first thing in the morning? But there is logic to this, because if you think about it, we're at the crossroads of people and technology. So what better space for us to be in than to be in the staffing industry? This is where we can really instill change. We can help our clients and prospects, and the key to that is knowing what they're thinking. So hopefully in the next hour or so, we'll be able to share what's in the minds of the CIO. Now, I'm going to say CIO. In reality, I'm kind of talking about IT leaders in general. I'm going to use the term loosely, CIO representing all IT leaders. But as we know, especially from the panelists that we have today, the title of IT leadership comes in many different titles, many different sizes and shapes. So therefore, use the term loosely for the purpose of discussion. So it's important for us to know what they're thinking, because what we want to be able to do in this room is hopefully walk away with little nuggets that we can then take and help educate our salespeople and our recruiters so that they can understand CIOs a little bit better, right? Understand what their priorities are and what their pain points are. So, as Mark said, I'm Anna Frazzetto. I've been with Harvey Nash for about 15 years now. And actually, I've worn many hats at Harvey Nash. I started off managing a branch for Harvey Nash, the Connecticut operation, both doing sales and recruiting, to what I do today, which is really responsible for sales and delivery across the board for our solutions business. And often I get asked the question, how do you do that? You've always been solutions oriented, but pretty much most of my career I've worked in the staffing industry, because I think there is such great synergy and such a great marriage between the two. Because if you think about it, staffing is going to get your foot in the door, and then you can, once you land, you can expand within an account. So that's why I think the solution aspects adds a huge flavor to what an organization could provide. Now, today, I am most excited about the panelists that we have. We have phenomenal panelists, and I really appreciate that they've taken the journey to come out here and be able to share what's on their minds, and hopefully leave us with a little bit of insight as to what can we expect when we're talking to that C-level suite as far as what their needs and demands are. We have Yuri Adyar, who's Chief Innovation and Transformation Officer for the Ogilvy Group. We have Jon Hagensen, who's Chief Technology Officer for Innova International. And last but not least, we have Christine Stone, who is most recently VP Program Management Office for Brookfield Properties. I'm going to ask them to join me on stage a little later on, but first I need to kind of plant the stage, right, and build the foundation for what we're going to be talking about today. So, the survey. Harvey Nash has been doing this survey for 21 years. So let's kind of put that in perspective. If you think about it, 21 years ago, we didn't have iPhones. We didn't have Androids, right? We didn't have a full-blown computer in the palm of our hands, right? So the world has really changed and evolved a lot. So we've seen a lot of data, a lot of impact to organizations across the board. We have almost 4,000 respondents. It touches 108 countries. And not to mention, we have 3 million data points as far as really kind of seeing what's inside the mind of these IT leaders. Yes, I'm a lot of fun at parties. I love data. But I think data is the roadmap to the future. It's our crystal ball. It helps us predict what some of the issues and challenges are. And last but not least, it represents $250 billion of IT budget spend, which is quite impressive. I have to say our survey is the largest survey of its kind. It beats out Gartner and it beats out any of the other CIO surveys that you see out there. I have to say that's always been one of my attraction points to Harvey Nash, is the fact that we're able to provide these thought leadership pieces. And then later on, I'm going to talk about the Women in Tech survey, which I'm most excited about. Okay, so let's talk about some of the key findings. Number one, change. Who's experiencing change? And when we talk about change, we're talking about innovation in products and services and change impact and transformation over a 3-year period. Now, honestly, personally, I'm kind of surprised when you say 3 years because most of the clients that we talk to are experiencing change in 12 to 18 months, not 3 years. But as you can see, no surprise in the slide as far as the results. 41% are saying that they're experiencing some change, 38% major change, and we have radical change at 6%. Now, let's just pause for a second. Who wants to meet the 3% that are experiencing no change? How is that happening in 2019? I've never talked to a company out there, regardless of size, that is not experiencing some change. So I kind of want to say that maybe those 3% didn't understand the question, and we'll see different results next year, because I would imagine that it would be a total of 100% experiencing some change. So now, good news, budgets. Budgets are increasing, steady incline. It's at the highest that it's ever been, 55%. How wonderful is this, right? Does anybody remember 2008 and 9? Oh my goodness, how painful were those times, right? We've clawed our way out of that recessionary period. And I have to say, I was a little bit apprehensive when I saw the dip in 2015. But luckily, we see great increase, right? We're taking a look at 2016 to 2019. And I would anticipate that this number would continue to grow. Now, what's eating up the budget? Cybersecurity, no shock there. Automation, artificial intelligence, and anything that has to do with data is really what's consuming the budget increase. Now, one of my personal favorite topics was always talking about shadow IT. Now we've changed the name, we call it business managed IT to sound a little bit better, to sound that it's more accepted. But in reality, I kind of relate this to the pendulum swinging, right? So we go from one extreme where command and control, IT has to manage everything, right? And then now we swing in the opposite direction where we're accepting that the business could have certain components of IT and that they're actually managing certain aspects of the budget. So therefore, it's kind of interesting to see, but what I think is going to happen in years to come is it'll probably be somewhere in the middle where, yes, the business can manage certain aspects of IT, but ultimately it all rolls up into one centralized IT operation. So pretty much 1 in 10 encourage the business having certain IT components and operations, and 53% accept it. Don't necessarily promote it, but they accept it. And just a third are complaining about it, saying, we really don't want this to happen within the organization. I think what's impressive is how much of the overall IT budget the business actually manages. So the highest, 36% of the respondents says that it's roughly between 1 to 10% of the IT budget is managed by the business. Again, it just shows the collaboration that needs to take place within an organization, but this impacts our CIOs, and it impacts how we sell to our CIOs, which hopefully we'll dig a little bit deeper as we go through the session today. Technologies. What are some of the disruptors out there? I would say that this would not be any surprise or shock to anyone. Cloud computing, number one, as far as both on a large scale or on a small scale. It represents over 77% of the respondents saying that that's the biggest technology impact. Now, the other items that are on the list are the usual suspects, right? Artificial intelligence, virtual reality, blockchain, cybersecurity, automation. So things that we keep hearing over and over from our clients that they're looking for skills within that arena. So talking about skills. Honestly, Mark and I did not coordinate our sessions, but one of the number one items that he mentioned was the skill shortage that's being experienced by the staffing sector and being able to supply the talent. It's at an all-time high. Our clients are constantly complaining, we need more people, because think about it, technology is changing so rapidly that it's really difficult to be able to find the people that have the skills that are necessary. Top 5 candidates that are problem children as far as skills that you're looking for. Business analysis. That's been on the list, I have to say, probably for the last 10 years that we've been doing the survey. Architecture, some form of architecture has been on the list, again, for the last 10 years, I would say. Of course, some of the other contenders, anything that has to do with big data, analytics, cybersecurity, and last but not least, artificial intelligence. These are all key areas where us in the staffing sector, we have to figure out how do we get creative to be able to supply this type of talent to our clients or to our future clients. Kind of moving the conversation along to gender diversity, right? Because here's an area where you look at how can we better populate how we're providing the talent to our clients. We should dig a little bit deeper as far as why are we not doing such a great job when it comes to diversity. Sadly, when you look at the CIO results, it says only 12% represent females as IT leaders, or 22% are part of an IT team of a project, right? So that's only increased a little bit from 21% last year to 22%. So staggering numbers, which makes us think a little bit, how can we get a little bit more creative in how we're able to produce the talent that we need to produce? I know there's great programs out there as far as being affiliated with schools and starting young and trying to breed that from the bottom up, and then of course top down having programs. But this kind of led us to the Women in Tech survey. As I mentioned, the CIO survey, Harvey Nash has been doing that actually in concert with KPMG for the last 4 years. Well, for the last 4 years, Harvey Nash in concert with ARA, which is Attract, Retain, and Advance Women in Technology. I have to say, this organization has been in place for about 6 years, formed by 3 of my dearest friends, Leslie Vickery, who is the founder of Clear Edge Marketing, Megan McCann, who is the founder of McCann Partners, and Jane Gilligan-Hamner, who's vice president for Harvey Nash. It's a labor of love. We have about 6,000 participants nationally. But the reason why we joined forces as far as being able to conduct this survey is we think the data is telling. It also helps raise awareness. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to be part of the Women's Executive Lunch, and one of the topics that was discussed at our table was actually by one of our panelists, who's going to be Christine, who's one of our panelists today, had to do with if you don't measure it, you don't quantify it, then you're not tracking it properly, and you're not going to see the ball move, right? You're not going to see positive traction. So that's why I think surveys are important, because it kind of gives us that insight. So we've been conducting this survey for about 4 years, and it has about 75% are female respondents, 25% are male respondents. Very important to get the male perspective in regards to what's going on in the gender diversity scenario. But I think some key findings that we saw today has to do with the unwelcoming IT work environment. I think this is great news because in the 4 years that we've actually been conducting this survey, the number has dropped from 35% to 25%. So only 25% of the women are saying that IT is an unwelcoming work environment. That's great news. It's positive steps. Again, it's a small step, but it's a positive step. I used to have a consulting director that worked for me, and when we would talk about certain projects, and sometimes some of these projects would be tremendous in size and different aspects, very complex, we'd kind of pause and she'd say, Anna, don't worry. The way you eat an elephant is one small piece at a time. And that kind of resonates with me because honestly, that's how you impact change. It's one small step at a time. Now, on the opposite, men it's gone up, where men are ranked saying unwelcoming environment has gone from 5% to 14%. So it makes you wonder, is this kind of a balancing that's tipping here between a male and female perspective as far as what's unwelcoming? Or maybe are some of the programs that are being introduced within an organization making it now unwelcoming for men? Which of course is something that we need to discuss. We don't want to, create any kind of negative reaction. So now, sadly, when you look at, oh boy, when you say you really have to hit this hard, you really do have to hit this hard. Okay, one-on-one fears. 22% of the respondents say men are reluctant to interact one-on-one with women. Now, okay, let's think about this a little bit. It kind of goes back to the analogy of the pendulum swinging. I think what happens, it's human nature, right? You start in one direction, and then the pendulum swings to another direction where it's somewhat negative. You have a negative reaction. But I think what's going to happen is it's going to balance out where we'll be able to define a new normal. It's really the key is being able to understand the differences. Does anybody work in multiple countries? Raise of hands. Okay, so we have probably about a third of you that work in multiple countries. When you engage in a different country, you have to understand the cultural differences as you engage in this other country, right? You want to make sure that you're selling the right way. The way it works for you to sell in New York City is going to be completely different than how you sell in Sydney, Australia, right? So therefore, we need to be a little bit sensitive to that. It's the same thing when you look at gender diversity or just diversity in general. You need to understand the cultural differences and how can we work better together. Now, getting on board. I think this one is really exciting because you look at formal programs that are being built by organizations across the board. It's gone up. A third of the companies are saying that they actually have formal programs that support women in tech. And if we dig a little bit deeper, you actually see that 32% of organizations are focused on recruiting and hiring, and 36% of the organizations say that they have programs that focus on career advancement. Both of these stats have increased respectively 3% and 5%, which is, again, tremendous. It's small progress, but it's progress. Last but not least, in the Women in Tech survey, I have to say, is the compensation chasm, which really, really frustrates me because it is 2019. How could we possibly have pay inequality today? There is so much information out there, and honestly, I think all of us in this room, being in the staffing sector, we can play a significant role in impacting this in the positive way. We have to make sure that we educate organizations. Now, I have to believe that sometimes these gaps, these pay inequalities happen by accident, but I think we can make an effort to really change this. What's interesting is more than twice as many men as women believe their company offers equal pay, so 75% versus 32%. Now, again, this could be representative of the organizations that they come from, and therefore that's why they feel that way. Also, I think sometimes when things are personal to you, you might look at it with a different color glasses than if it's not impacting you. So you might think things are all positive from a male perspective, but maybe not so positive from a female perspective. So I think that adds a little bit of a flavor to that. What's sad is that 9% of the men said that they feel that they do not provide pay equality versus 38% of the women. So if we kind of look at this from the flip side. So tremendous data that I've shared with you in the last few seconds. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to ask the panelists to start coming up here so we can get into the panel discussion. As we do the panel discussion, I would hope that all of you are starting to think of questions that you might want to ask based on the data that we've seen. Lots of data that I've tried to represent in the last 10, 15 minutes here, but clearly the key now is being able to learn from some of these masters here that can share with us what they're seeing as some of the pain points. They're giggling behind me. I hate that. I hate the fact that they're behind me right now. Okay, so we have Yuri Adyar, Chief Innovation and Transformation Officer, the Ogilvy Group, Jon Hagensen, Chief Technology Officer, Innova International, and Christine Stone, most recently VP Program Management Officer, Brookfield Properties. At this point, what I'd like to do is turn it over to you to introduce yourselves in a little bit more detail, and maybe if you can share what's so relevant about what we're talking about in the two surveys. So kind of what brought you here today, other than me calling you?
Ladies first.
Oh, thank you. Good morning. I'm Christine Stone. I've been in IT for 31 years, the last 12 in leadership. I am the spouse of one, parent of four, mentor to many. My area of expertise lies in strategic planning and turnaround and modernization of IT organizations. If I had a hashtag, it'd be progress. I have an honest-to-God innate interest in progress, both in human talent and its capacity to grow and develop, and in the impact that makes on profitability for our organizations. So I am particularly fascinated with how I can help women come into technology and stay in technology, and I've adjusted my personal strategy in the last few years to make certain that I'm measuring my results, and it's had a great difference. So I love this survey. It's one of my favorite things to take a look at, but I also feel strongly that each of us has to take something like that and then ask ourselves, what's my personal call to action and how am I measuring it?
Excellent, thank you.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yuri?
Yuri Adyar. I am the Chief Innovation and Transformation Officer for the Ogilvy Group. I love the Photoshop picture you have on the screen there. Sorry, you're not seeing the real thing. I've had many roles within this organization. I worked on 3 continents as a CTO and a CIO in a prior lilife. I don't know what I was smoking when I took the CIO role, I can tell you that. It's a very, very hard role to do. But I can tell you, the one thing I've noticed in the recent years is that there's a great book by David Epstein that actually defines my career very well. It's called Range. And even though we've got technological knowledge in that vertical, I think just having that business knowledge across has created a lot of opportunities for me. And one of the reasons I came here when Anna asked was because I've been successful because of many people along the way in my journey. And I try to pay that forward with my own teams and create the diversity that we're looking for, but it has to come from the leadership. It has to come top down, and I thought this was a great opportunity to discuss that.
Excellent.
Cool. Morning, everyone. My name is Jon Hagensen. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Enova. We're an online lending company based in Chicago. It is my 4th CTO gig. I was a CTO at FTD for a while, getting people flowers. I was CTO at Wheels, getting people cars, and I was a CTO at Applied Systems back when it was founded, getting people insurance. So, but what underlies all that is 2 things: technology enablement, technology directly to consumers, and people. And a big part of the reason why I'm here for this conference and why I was excited when Anna invited me is, despite the fact that I've been doing something with technology since I was 11 years old, I recognize that technology is fundamentally about people. It's fundamentally about getting good people and about getting diverse teams. And that's, thinking of the survey, that's what really speaks to me about the survey.
Excellent, terrific. So let's start with some of the questions. Yuri, I'll start with you. So let's start at looking at high speed of digital change, right, identified by the CIO survey. Are your organizations up against the same kind of rapid and comprehensive product and service and business impact? Maybe if you could talk a little bit about that.
So we're in the creative business. So our outputs are products that are strategic and brand building. So we do companies like IBM. If you've ever seen a Dove soap ad, we've been doing that for the last 75 years. 1/4 moisturizing cream. So we do that in 168 cities around the world. But the interesting thing with that kind of product is that we feel the winds of change first, because we're globally focused. Our clients are in multiple verticals. We've got technology clients like IBM, financial clients like American Express. So we start to feel the change quite rapidly. And I was listening to your survey earlier, Anna, and you were talking about 3 years, and I think that's like 70 dog years in digital transformation world. We are living projects and strategies now in 6-month intervals, right? And that's how my new role was created, because we've got to be so adept at changing things quickly. And the big change we're seeing, and this is something I talk about a lot, is that every transformation tends to be a digital transformation today. You can have a conversation about working capital, it ends up on some kind of RPA platform. You talk about issues with search, it ends up on some kind of technology platform. So we are seeing the change quite rapidly. Our company has been on the journey for about 2 years since our CEO announced the Next Chapter initiative. And we've compiled all the activities we have to undertake, and we're looking at it very comprehensively. It's important to do that, but it's also very important to prioritize everything, because you don't want to be boiling the ocean and not solving any problems. But we are feeling it quite tremendously.
Right, and so and that's why I think it's so relevant we talk about like the role of the CIO, what's on their minds, because digital transformation, for example, I would think most of us in this room talk to our clients and they're going through some level of transformation. And as we've often talked about, transformation is not a destination model, it's a journey, right, that you're going down. So therefore it's an ongoing process. So that's why it's so important for us to know what is impacting CIOs today, because their staffing needs is going to be a direct output from the impact of these transformations. So thanks, Yuri, for that. Jon, maybe you can add a little bit of color to that also.
Sure. There's 2 things that we think about in our business. So we are fundamentally consumer driven, and consumers really set the pace in terms of what technology we use. So we've gone from being very focused on mobile web to native mobile applications, now even to voice applications. So we knew, and we'd actually been doing some work on voice apps, on Alexa in particular, because we knew that it was coming. Our marketing team just did a survey about 3 weeks ago, and we found that 28% of our existing customers would like to get information and make a payment on Alexa. And that blew us away because we're like, we know it's coming and we're like, oh, it's here. And we have to go. And so consumers really drive a lot of that change. I think internally, and part of what me and my team do is also serve the enterprise, which is 1,300 employees in 3 countries, is think about what they want to enable their work, to make them more effective. And I always joke with people that if you were a CIO or did internal IT, your job was really easy until 2007. In 2007, Steve Jobs said, I'm going to put out this device called an iPhone, and I'm going to let you access your work email from it. And after that, our cheese was moved. So we went from, you get a Windows 95 laptop and you like it, and you might get a BlackBerry and that's all you get, to you accessed your work email from the Caribbean using an internet kiosk with your iPad. Okay, let's figure out how we secure that. So I think that's another big part of that's driving internal IT change.
Right. Well, how true is that, right? It's IT's worst nightmare when you take a look at social media and how that's impacted the work environment. It used to be forbidden that you can't get on Twitter, you can't get on Facebook, you can't get on Instagram at work, and now you're using it for advertising, promotion, marketing campaigns, and you have to try to secure it. Again, pretty challenging. Christine, maybe you can talk about, everyone here in the audience is in the people business, right? And we're sensitive to how change affects people. Right? So how has your leadership had to change in order to better help and manage talent, which is so critical?
I think one of I like a plan. I like a solid plan, and I like detail. And I've had to get over myself in the last couple of years especially, because if I want teams to move exceptionally fast, I've got to reduce the bureaucracy that they have to get through to get things started. So I would say that's been a key change, is to start to do whatever I can to step back bureaucracy and overhead, have people move fast and drive change. The second thing is I always was this, but I had to amp up my support for a career lattice. So instead of there being a ladder where you step here and then you step here and you step here, I've become a passionate advocate for opportunities being made available to people based on work assignments, or maybe being loaned to a different team or a short-term project, convincing people you've got a great career here at this company, just stay with us and we'll give you different things to work on. You don't need to hop to another company in order to achieve that. So I would say the career lattice, backing off bureaucracy. But lastly, I think our responsibility as leaders to tell a story in a way that people get excited, they get what their part is in the story ties them to the direction of the business. I think we all have to work on a storytelling muscle. So storytelling, reduction of bureaucracy, and getting really flexible about how to give opportunities to talent are probably 3 things that I think help people with change.
Fantastic. Yes,
Can I
Yuri.
just build on that story
Sure,
part, right?
sure.
So that I often talk about it, so I'm glad you brought it up. We are getting into an age of extremely complex technology landscapes, and we all agree with that, right? And many people don't understand it, especially the C-suite, right? The CEOs and the CXOs need to be explained what's going on. And if you cannot tell a good story and you go in with the rhetoric, jargon, buzzwords that everybody's talking about, you're not getting the budget that you need to do that. So the storytelling bit, I completely agree. That's the right thing to do. Right,
no, that's great. So let's change a little bit of direction. Jon, maybe you could talk a little bit about AI and recruitment, right? So we talk about threats in technology. We talk about some of the challenges. So share a little bit about what you're seeing as far as from an impact perspective.
Sure. So I think AI has obviously transformed a lot of industries, and it's only the beginning of how we think about it. It is from interacting with AI. If you to get here, if you talk to your airline, you probably talked to a bot, you didn't talk to a human, to day-to-day decisions about insurance, banking, healthcare are in some ways made by AI. And I think in recruiting, AI, it can be very powerful, but I think today, that power is at the top of the funnel. And what I mean by that is, if you're looking to make sure that your candidate pool is diverse, there are great tools out there to look at your public postings, your job descriptions, to make sure that they are not using gendered or biased language. If you're looking to administer a wide array of coding or other technical assessments and have them graded quickly, you can use AI for that. But I think in between that, finding and filling that candidate pool and actually you and the candidate deciding whether or not that is a good fit is an actual human interaction. And I don't think that goes away. I think you can get great candidates coming into the door, but talking to them, understanding their journey, understanding their fit, and them feeling comfortable that you are the right place for them to go next is going to come down, and I think will always come down to people.
Excellent. So let's pose the question. Obviously, everybody in the audience here is in the staffing industry. So I'd love to hear from each of you. Actually, Yuri, let's start with you. As you look at recruiting and staffing firms to help you meet your talent needs, what are the qualities and capabilities that you're looking for in a partner? What stands out when a staffing firm reaches out? What have you seen work best, and what is not working so great?
No speak English.
You knew I was going to put you on the spot.
Well, let me answer that slightly differently. So I did an informal survey of CEOs and CIOs recently at an event in Florida, and about 110 people. It was an evening dinner, very informal, non-scientific survey. And I asked a very simple question. I said, what do you do to foster innovation in your organization? Not the corporate statement on your website. What do you do personally to help the teams along? And by a show of hands, again, very non-scientific, is like 70% of the people in the room didn't have a cohesive answer. About 20% had a very good answer, but not necessarily all the way. And about 7% had a very formed process to innovation. And necessity is the mother of all invention. So if you are innovating, it's out of necessity and you're moving forward, right? And I talk a lot about the 4 types of companies that we're looking at, and we like to position ourselves in that. There's the reactive and the adaptive, which form very much part of that 70%. And it matches your survey data, even though we haven't synced this information up. And then you've got the very dynamic and visionary companies, right? They're the 27%. I like to think we're more on the dynamic, trying to get to the visionary. So what we're looking for is not necessarily the generic opportunities that that you want to fill for day-to-day operational aspects of it. We're trying to change the world. We're trying to do big things. At least that's our intent. If we do it or not, we have to see if we succeed. But when we try to do that, we're not looking for that very generic kind of placement. We're looking for the skill set that you covered in those 5 major skills there. And I'm looking at them and saying, that's exactly right. That's exactly what we need. And in the breakout session, I'm going to cover a little more on some of the advanced technologies we're working on. But those are the areas. That's what I look for in a partner. Last evening, there was a gentleman up here, the last keynote, who talked about moving to solution-based, operational styles. And those are the companies that are very dynamic and visionary, and that's where I think the industry is going. That's what I look for from my perspective.
Right, no, that's terrific. Christine, would you like to add to that?
Sure. I would say when I look to a partner for talent, it depends on what I'm looking for. Usually it's 2 different things. Either I need capacity and I need it quickly. So the ease of onboarding, the quick availability of talent is so valuable to me. The second time that I need talent partners is when I've got a specific problem to solve, and my favorite partners, honestly, are straight with me. They say, I've got it and I can nail it, or they'll say, actually, I don't have it. And I'd rather do that than have someone come in who's fresh to the role or not exactly the right fit, then I fail and my partner fails. So I'm either looking for like a quick solution to help me solve a problem that's pretty straightforward, or I'm looking for a good fit, and for that, I'm looking for some honesty on both sides. What do I need? Sometimes if you say I've got the best person, but I don't have them for 3 months, I will change the timing of my project to wait for the best person, then I'll try to accelerate it. But that requires trust and honesty on both sides. Does that help?
Fantastic. Absolutely.
Yeah,
John?
just from my perspective, I'll take it more for the filling full-time role. So one is really get to know us and really get to know our culture, because culture is not just important, it is everything. It is everything for what we're trying to accomplish, because that is a long-term relationship. We are trying to build things. In many ways, we're trying to invent things in our industry. So we need people that are good adds to our culture. The other is bringing diverse candidates.
Absolutely.
I talked to our HR department about not working with staffing firms because they clearly don't care about or get diversity. And it's just about, I've got a job description, I've got C# or Java, and here's 10 people. We want to see diverse candidates. And that not just gets you in the door at my company, that keeps you in the family in my company.
Yeah, and this is why I say we're the luckiest people or the most important people on the planet, because we can play such a critical component in being able to deliver the right solution. So obviously we're hearing from, this is a great representation. We spend a lot of time at Harvey Nash talking to lots of C-level individuals, and they're saying the same thing. So this is a great sampling for all of us to be able to learn from. Yuri, maybe you could spend just a couple of seconds talking about, you have a new book that's coming out in early next year, I believe.
That's right.
So, and it talks about digital transformation, the journey, not the destination. Maybe you could spend 2 minutes just touching on that.
So the book is called Digital Revolution, and the R is in parentheses because there's evolution for some and revolution for the others, right? So that's the whole dynamic of who's ready for it. So the book is based primarily on the fact that we've read a lot of theory about change management, about digital platforms and transformation. We focused here largely on stories from very successful people. So I've interviewed people from Nestle, from CVS Viacom, from PwC, innovation leaders from around the world. It's not just my story, it's about all of this. But it also brings into context something that you mentioned, John, which is the human aspect of it. Because a lot of what we talk about in digital transformation tends to end up on the technology side. And the basis of the book is the smart transformation method that I've created, which differentiates from digital proficiency and technical proficiency. The conversations that you have, which are largely around the business issues, which is why my role is broken away from the core technology function, is very different from actually solving the problem. So SMART stands for Survey, Map, Alignment, which is all to do with the business function, then the research into technology platform and the transformation. So it's a long journey. But you can apply it differently to many things. But the book is based around that kind of approach to change from within and actually taking into consideration the human emotional aspect of change, the empathy that is required, the communications, the culture piece of it is very critical.
Excellent, thank you. What I'd like to do now is kind of maybe change the conversation a little bit and kind of talk about the Women in Tech survey and diversity initiatives. We've kind of touched a little bit on it, but I want to drill a little bit deeper. Maybe to kind of help set the stage, last night I found a couple of interesting quotes that I thought really represented what the message that we're trying to kind of carry forward today. So when we listen and celebrate what is both common and different, we become wiser, more inclusive, and better as an organization. This was by the Chief Talent Officer, Pat Wouters from ServiceNow. One of my personal favorites is that a diverse mix of voices leads to better discussions, decisions, and outcomes for everyone. And this is from Sundar from Google. Again, tremendous, I think, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that because this is near and dear to me. Inclusion is not a matter of political correctness. It is the key to growth. And this was by Jesse Jackson, actually, which I thought was kind of interesting. And last but not least, diversity and inclusion needs to be something that every single employee at the company has a stake in. And this is by Bo Young Lee, who's the new Chief Diversity Officer for Uber. So a lot of discussion in the industry in regards to diversity, and diversity not just specifically to gender, but across the board. Now, personally, I always talk about, to me, diversity is such a critical component when you're shaping a team. John, I love what you said about, diversity being so key, because I almost relate it to cooking. When you're cooking, don't you want to cook with lots of different flavors and spices and herbs, and you wind up producing a fabulous dish? Or do you want to just be cooking with salt, right? So this is what, it really does work, where when you have a very diverse group, you wind up getting better ideas, more creativity, more innovation, more efficiencies that come out of it because of the diversity mix that you have within the team. I think when we look at the Women in Tech survey, so Christine, maybe you can also share a little bit about the book that you have coming up, but we also saw a percentage of women reporting an unwelcoming environment improves from the previous years, being 25% versus 35% from the previous years. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the Chicago tech community, and maybe touch on the book that you have coming out shortly.
Sure. I think that, honestly, that data point surprised me, because Bureau of Labor Statistics still shows that we're losing women in tech, and we're losing them at all levels. We're losing them at the major level in college. We're losing them in middle management. We've stabilized at leaders. But I have seen some organizations do some really interesting things. Target in Minneapolis has a rule of thumb that their incoming cohort of software developers, recent grads, must be 50% women, 50% men, and they will actually shrink the size of the cohort if they can't find enough women to fill the part rather than have an imbalance. So they're doing a deliberate thing to move forward. John funds a Women in Technology conference in Chicago, and it's run entirely by young women in his organization, and they're a vibrant, rowdy bunch of people. And it's not just that it supports the growth and the power of that community within Innova, but it's within the Chicago ecosystem as well. So there's some really interesting things that organizations are doing to hold on to folks. If you all are interested, there's an article from the Harvard Business Review. The authors are Ely and Carly C-A-R-L-I, and Ely is the other. It's this pragmatic list of simple things you can do to increase the number of women in your organization. It's things like, if you have 5 women coming in and you have 5 teams, put all 5 women on one team instead of putting 1 on each team. When you're the only person, you feel a sense of isolation and loneliness, and your retention level of people when they're the only person of color or woman in a team, your retention levels are terrible. So cluster them up together. Double check performance reviews. Make sure they don't have language like blunt, direct, or things that are more often attributed to women than they are to men in reviews. Check job descriptions. Check your partners who provide talent to you. So that article has a lot of really pragmatic things. On the theme of pragmatism, so I have 4 children, and Jim and I have raised them while we were both working full time. And my folks had 7 kids, right? So I should quit my whining, because it's half as easy. But my mom didn't work. She stayed home, and my dad worked crazy hours. And so when I came up against challenges, I really didn't have anybody who could provide me with advice. I was the first generation of a dual working partnership. And as I speak to women, and I'll speak about career progression and strategic planning and things like that in tech, we get to Q&A, and everybody wants to ask me questions about how I pulled off having kids and doing the jobs that I did. So I start sharing secrets. I'm blushing sitting here talking about it. My mom's horrified by these secrets. I put my small children to bed in their clothes for the next day, because I did not want to argue. I'm serious. If you live in Chicago, it's cold in the morning, and getting out of your PJs. We do free-range feeding when our kids were little. It's like chickens. You put healthy food out where they can get it, and you just let them eat whenever they're hungry. And you're not arguing about dinner or about what you've made. When somebody asks me if I can go to a meeting, I never say, I have a pediatrician's appointment, I have to get to Carline, I have a parent-teacher conference. I just say I have a conflict. How about 2? And they say yes. So there are all these pragmatic things that helped me have a professional presence and excellence in my office, but also success. So the book is like all these pragmatic tips about getting ahead in your career and raising kids. It's called The Parent Track, but the tagline is work-life balance hacks to elevate your career and raise good humans, because I really believe that's possible. But this kind of ties back to, how do we choose? Like, we all say we want to be diverse. We all say it's a good thing. But you have to have specific ideas about how to pull it off. And we all say we want women to succeed. The single largest variable that impacts a woman's compensation trajectory over the course of her career is whether she has a family and when she does it. So I think we have to find ways, I have to find ways to help parents navigate this successfully, and I think it can be done. I really do believe that.
Yeah, it's interesting. We didn't get a chance to cover it, but one of the stats from the Women in Tech survey has to do with work-life balance, and 42% of the respondents said that trying to raise children and having work-life balance impacts their careers. And if you drill a little bit deeper, 32% of the men said it impacted them. 44% of the women said that it impacted them. So what's interesting about that is there's definitely an impact, and more we're seeing in the work environment that it's affecting men just as it's affecting women.
Yep.
Because as more and more the roles have to be balanced to be able to provide, for the household. Okay, what I'd like to do is open it up to the audience for some questions, if we have questions.
Question right
There's
here.
one.
I can't see it all. Yes. Okay. Hi. I'm like, where are you?
I hope I wrote the numbers down. This is for Christine. You said that you've been in IT for 31 years.
Correct.
But only 12 in leadership.
Correct.
That took you a long time to get to leadership. Was that your choice, or did you find that it was difficult to get to leadership?
That's a really good question. I was leading smaller teams in those early years, but I made deliberate decisions about roles that I took. For a long time, I led either very small teams of 2 or 3, or I led really complicated, massive projects, because when you do that, you can control your schedule, and you can be at Carline at 2:45 in the afternoon to pick up your kids, and then work on your project plans and your risk assessments late at night. So for me, that was I'm 53. When I first started in tech, I was getting my butt grabbed, and people were suggesting I wear short skirts to meetings. So there's been a lot of, I'm so grateful for the progress, right? But there were a lot of limitations to me. I was the only woman on the majority of teams that I was on for the first part of my career. And I also wanted to I didn't want brats. I really wanted smart, capable children who did good things, and I wanted to put my time. So for me, my only option to have the flexibility and schedule that I had and to get paid well was to be more of an individual contributor. I really want that to change for my daughters. I don't want them to have those same constraints.
Anna, we have a question.
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
Thank you all for being here with us at Tech Service. This is a great conversation. And I feel bad going off the gender question, but I have a real generic one, and maybe Yuri, if you'd answer. All of our clients talk about digital transformation and digital strategy, and it's a little bit like 10 different flavors of ice cream when they describe it. Yes. Would you mind describing your vision of digital strategy?
Oh, that's a good one.
I should save that no speak English line for now. Well, the best definition actually came from our head of global consulting, Carla Hendra. She's the CEO of Global Consulting, and I interviewed her for the book, and I said I interviewed some very smart people because I didn't have enough of a contribution myself. So she said, digital transformation is very simply all the technological pathways to growth. One line. It captures the essence of what we're trying to do. And if you're in the breakout session, I'll show you an example of how we did this. And I adapted the Stephen Covey model of an urgent, important matrix. When you sit through these design thinking sessions on digital transformation, you will get 50, 60 ideas coming your way, because suddenly people have come together, understood the challenge they've got. But if you're starting your transformation with 60 ideas, you might as well go home, because it's never going to happen, right? So setting the priority for those on what is operationally important, what is strategically important, what should be in an incubator, how you manage your pipeline of new ideas, and how you manage your customer or client side is what we've started to do. So we've followed that mantra. unknowingly, but ultimately everything we're doing is a pathway to growth. And that's not my line, that's Carla's line. It's a great line. And if you follow that, I think you'll answer the question yourself in whatever situation you're in at that point in time. I hope that answers the question.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to ask a question to the panelists as you're thinking about more questions. This is one of our favorites, and I'll tee it up to each of you. If you were empowered with enough money and resources to make one radical change that would dramatically and immediately impact inclusion and diversity in your organization, what change would you make? So John, why don't you start?
Yeah, so I really hope to God my CFO is not listening to this.
It's being recorded.
Great, I can't wait to see Steve tomorrow. I would take enough money to create 100 or 150 full ride stipend-based scholarships in Chicago with either universities or boot camps. You get paid to go, the tuition would be free, and at the end of it, you give us 2 years.
Excellent.
Whatever that cost, I would make it rain with scholarships, but they would only go to women, and they would only go to underrepresented minorities.
Wow, what a great idea. This might be a new service offering out there, right? Yeah.
I love that idea.
Christine.
I would create internships and training programs that are only open to liberal arts majors, period. No negotiation. And there's a reason why. I believe that liberal arts majors are taught critical thinking and how to communicate ideas. Each of us in our organizations, as we integrate technologies, we're going to have problems no one has ever seen before because that's the rapid rate of change of technology. So those skills that people learn, they're actually not that relevant when you're in a room and the shit's hitting the fan and you've got to solve things quickly. You need people who are thinking about things that no one else in the room is thinking about. And if you really want to get, I have the heart of a capitalist. If I want to solve a problem fast, I need people who disagree with me. Because I'm going to come up with the solution quickly, but I need people who are going to say, but what if you did this, or what if you did this? And it might tick me off a little bit, but I'll get to a better answer. I really believe liberal arts majors are underrepresented. There was a great article in the Wall Street Journal just a couple weeks ago about global economists are saying the biggest problem with global economy is the lack of English majors because we don't have enough people who can tell the story of what the implications are of economies across the globe. So that's my crazy idea.
See, so I was an English major. 30 years on, my
Well
time
done.
has come.
Finally appreciate it. Yuri.
Well, so I want to pick up on something you said, Christine, earlier, the lattice for career progression. And so there's a lot of conversation. All our companies are doing something about diversity. There are a lot of programs. The strategist in me wants to sustain that, right? So I'm thinking a little further. And I met the CTO of NBC Universal recently. And he gave me a great idea that they employ within some parts of the organization. But I'd like to take that and put it to women in our organization globally, right? When we ask people for their specialization, they always tell us their major is computer science or whatever it is at that point in time. But nobody asks you what's your minor, right? And so the What's Your Minor program basically takes people from your group where you engage with leaders in other groups within your organization, departments, and get them cross-trained to do other things. And if we do that, we will encourage diversity naturally through the progression of, I like this person the way they think, I got to get them out of the technology space or out of the whatever department they're in, and give them opportunities to grow in that lattice format, because actually creating a method to actually getting through that lattice is where I was thinking. So I like the idea of what's your minor, and train them on more than the technology stack. They become better storytellers as well.
Yeah.
Excellent, I love that. Any other questions in the audience?
This
You
one
might
here.
have to shout out
Oh,
because I
over
can't
here.
see. Okay.
How would you help us utilize with that strategy from a staffing perspective? Because a lot of times our clients, when we're selling to you and your managers and your directors, are so specific about the environment and the technology they need coming from us that sometimes we're not able to get to that level of either documentation of diversity or the softer skill sets, right? Because we're paying premium.
Right.
What's your suggestions on us being able to?
My oldest daughter has a deadly combination dual major from a liberal arts college called McAllister, English and classical languages. So she can speak Latin and Greek fluently, which is awesome. She was recruited hard by a company called Epic Healthcare that's based out of Madison, and they've built a tool. People might know MyChart. If a doctor says sign up for MyChart, so it's one of the largest ERP systems for hospitals. Epic deliberately recruits liberal arts majors and teaches them how to be BAs, which is one of Anna's shortcomings, and project managers. And she's been on a rapid track since, and she's a product owner for one of the products now that actually handles transplants in hospitals. So one thing that could be an opportunity would be to look at liberal arts majors and see if there's a way to build a boot camp to bring in and train up on. There are a lot of aspects of architecture and analysis that I believe you don't need a deep background in. You need to know what's current now. How do you both feel about that, though?
I just wanted to join up that question with what you're saying in one of the statistics on the board earlier. So what I've found is that the technology budgets may be going up, but I've noticed they're starting to focus very much on core infrastructure. And I think it was 10% that is being managed by the business.
Yeah.
More and more that is getting carved out. So your audience, your targeting is very different going into the future. And I'm talking about near future, because already we're taking, in our case, more than 35% of the budget and moving it into different business elements because it needs to be managed differently. Now, does it tie back on some P&L to the technology budget at the end of the day? Yes, maybe. But then who's managing that money? Who's calling the shots on that investment? And I think that is happening more and more. Just something to keep in mind, looking into the future as you identify your customer base. But I would like to point that out. I'm predicting that the technology budget as a core will ultimately stick only to your basic cloud computing networks, computing requirements, and the businesses will own their portions of the P&L going forward.
All right. If I could also add, I think, to your question, is that I think what happens is when staffing folks go visit clients, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, they get into the mindset, this is a staffing person, so I'm going to talk their language, and you go, okay, this is the job description, this is what I need, I want the person to start in the next 2 weeks, I need, 5 people now, or whatever. We've trained our clients to talk back to them in that way. And I think one thing that we can do on the staffing side is that when we go in, I can assure you, a CIO would welcome the conversation if you did not approach it as just tell me what you need how many of what, and what are these, and when do they want. If you approach the conversation more like, tell me about what's going on in your organization. Are you open to, often we see candidates that don't have all the skill sets that you have on this list. Are you open to training for a portion of this? And you start the dialogue, and this is where you transition from a transactional type of conversation to more of a consultative conversation.
Yeah, just to endorse that, because that is something I've been really impressed that firms do, that they come in and they talk about their values. They talk about the fact that they look for diverse candidates, that they bring in people who maybe come from non-traditional backgrounds into these roles. And to echo what Anna said, I think you have to do that. We're all guilty of falling into that transactional mindset and go, we got 10 minutes, let's talk about the 3 skills we need. Yep. We need SageMaker, and we need to know if they know Chef, and then we move on. But the firms that come in and say, let us tell you a little bit about how we think about hiring people and how we think about bringing candidates to you is incredibly powerful.
Right, so I think it's twofold. Okay, so we have 1 minute left, so what I'd like to do is first invite everybody to please come continue the conversation at our breakout session at 10:45. We're at the Huntington Ballroom North. But last closing, if you had to leave 2 nuggets that we can share with the audience, let's start with you, Jon.
Yeah, so first I'll put a plug in for The Parent Trap, because I was lucky enough to read it. Christine gave me a proof of it. It is an awesome book. So when it comes out, it is a very heartfelt journey, but it is also filled with a lot of really good practical advice as a leader. The second is I wanted to, because I haven't been able to answer this question at another panel, so I want to go back to the survey result about men being uncomfortable mentoring women. And my message to those men is, grow up.
Yeah.
Christine. Gosh, I'm trying to think of a word of wisdom to share. I would say that change is coming so rapidly in technology all the time. So the better we are about assuming that what we knew a month or 3 ago is not relevant, probably the healthier we'll be. I know that I try to take that attitude as often as possible. When I make fewer assumptions, I end up in a better place.
Excellent, thank you.
So I always say, change is good, but you go first. Right? No one wants to go. No one wants to transform, right? And so I think the leaders, we face that every day. We're putting things in place that not everybody likes. Right. And you have to have the empathy with the leader and understand where they're coming from. So I want to emphasize, the consultative selling is a very important piece of it. But I'd also say identify whether the client, the company you're working with, is really in the dynamic or visionary space, or are they more focused on the operational, everyday aspect? And you may get a mix of both, but you can sell differently or have different conversations with different companies that fall into that reactive, adaptive style versus a dynamic, visionary space. I'll leave it there.
Excellent, thank you. So I've just been informed that we actually have 10 more minutes. The clock went down to 0, so I think it was a test if I was paying attention to the clock. So if you have any more questions, by all means, please ask.
I have a question.
Where are you? There you are, okay.
I heard you guys all talk about the skill sets and being willing to look more for the personality and the drive and the passion. And I've been hearing that a lot. And I also sit on the board for Women in Tech in Ohio. And I talk to a lot of CIOs who say all the same things. So from the senior leadership side, we're hearing that across the board, and I really like that. But once it hits HR, and once it hits approval, and I could probably speak for everyone in this room, they don't have the experience, they don't have the expertise, it's not even making it to your desk. And then we're put in the position of trying to go around the system, the program, the list, and not even in the VMS tools, but how can we get it to you guys if what your vision is and what your passion is isn't making it down to the people who allow the resumes to get to your desk?
So we work very closely with our people team, and I actually interview everyone who comes through the door at Innova. If they do the onsite, I'll talk to them at the very end of it because I want to meet them. Because again, to what I said earlier, the people decisions wind up being the most critical ones that we make. So we try to have that really close relationship with the people team. I would say for companies that don't, where it's more the HR team manages the process and tech only sees them at the end when candidates come through the door, is try to get in contact with those tech leaders through events like this, through other events that we go to. I know all of us on stage participate in D&I events. In Chicago, it is ARA. I've been privileged to be part of panels at ARA for a number of years. IC Stars, which helps inner city kids get into technology. So go to those events. And I actually wrote a blog post about this a few years ago. If you want to know the way to my heart as a vendor, it isn't asking me to go to a Blackhawks game because they're terrible. It is support go and support the causes that I believe in. And I think that's how you build that relationship. And then the tech leaders could bring and force that through the organization themselves.
Yeah, because it sounds like it's an education process, right? So it's how do you create the channel to then have this go back to HR to say, no, we're open to receiving these types of resumes.
Yeah.
Is being able to have that contact. Any other insight into this?
I think John said it well.
Yeah.
I think John said it well too.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
There's a question in the back of the room.
Okay.
I have one. So given that last question, are any of your organizations leveraging the gig economy to do that, to start to, again, use project-based work as a way to retrain hiring managers to consider non-traditional candidates or individuals with liberal arts backgrounds? We can sort of
Yeah, we've.
That's going to be the mission today.
Wow,
We're going to avoid HR.
I'm gonna leave the last bit of that alone because I don't want to have someone start my car at work next week. We've begun working with a local company in Chicago called the Mom Project.
Yep.
So the Mom Project it's a really interesting idea, and it speaks to something Christine said earlier, which is they look to find women who are still having childcare responsibilities and maybe can't have a full-time job, or at least a traditional full-time job, and they find project work for those women. So they're in tech, they're in marketing, they're in finance, and sometimes they come in the office, sometimes they work from home. But you're seeing more of that pop up, and in particular, it is around women who, as we know, still disproportionately have to deal with childcare and child and family raising responsibility. So I think you'll see some of that, and I think you'll see tech teams and other kind of functional groups and companies kind of lead the way in saying, I really need somebody that knows tax accounting. I don't care if they come in the office or not. I don't care if they can work more than 20 hours. And I think that'll lead you to what you're talking about.
Okay, I would like to embrace the HR comment at the end of your question. I have started bypassing the HR assessment funnel and asking to see all, sorry. It gets me in a lot of trouble sometimes, but I feel like if I looked at probably the last 10 people I recommended for hire in the last year, none of them would have made it to me otherwise. So my discussions with people who help me find talent, I have them face to face, and I talk about what DNA I'm looking for. Like, I need a bulldog, or I need someone who's hyper organized, or I actually need someone who's not hyper organized. I need someone who's hyper creative because this team's kind of stuck in a spin. I'm really looking for someone who's actually come from a different industry because I think we're blind to the fact that we reward repetitive, consistent results. And so I'm really looking, so I'm able to talk about these odd things that I'm looking for, and it brings me really terrific talent. But I do go around HR. There's another question.
Wait, I think you're.
I was just going to say, we've been in the gig economy before it was called the gig economy, because in the creative business, you need very specialized skills. But what I'm starting to see, and I don't know how it impacts your industry, is that as we go to more of a digital creative industry, there's an opportunity here. And I've had good fortune with HR partners. I've had some really good HR partners that have been able to elevate the right people quickly, and the pipeline moves along. But I would focus a little more on that, because we're shifting now from that into this whole digital-based economy, which we're all seeing. And the shortage of talent is kind of making it difficult. So we're looking at everything, and just like John, I interview everybody who comes into the team. So there's no debate about where we get them from.
Excellent. One more question. Yes.
First of all, I just wanted to say to all of you, behind behind many successful women is a supportive spouse.
That's correct.
Who really pushes you and just says, go for it, and doesn't have an issue with it.
I think behind everybody is a supportive
Yeah.
partner on either side.
Exactly.
That would be a spouse, exactly.
Yeah.
Partner. Wrong word. But I love what you're saying about, you want to be able to say to a staffing person, this is what I really need. Look for this. I personally think, and I've been in this business a long time, that VMS stopped that from being able to happen. Because it's just,
Yes.
we have, X number of days to get 3 resumes in,
Yeah.
and so on. Do you support VMS, or can you go to your HR departments and say, let's just pick vendors who understand our culture, to what you were saying, and will bring us the people with the aptitude and the attitude, because that's what liberal arts people are going to bring you, the creative, whatever. But,
Right.
do you see VMS as being valuable to you?
So
If I could just say one thing in
Yeah.
regards to that, I think it's the pendulum swings, the
I
same
agree.
scenario. Because what happens is that VMSs came into being, and then everything is trying to get funneled to the VMS. But I think what has to happen in organizations, I think there's a place for it, but there needs to be a balance, that maybe the more, rote, not so creative positions can all go through the VMS, but then when you're looking for certain roles that you can deal outside of the VMS. I think companies get in trouble when they're trying to push everything through the VMS. Yes?
Yeah, so I build on that. So VMS has its place, and one of the reasons we look so seriously at VMS is because working with the same company, we had different contracts in different cities and different countries around the world, and we had no visibility into this. And so the person getting charged X dollars in one place was being charged X square in the other place. Like, it was really different in the same country, same English-speaking United States of America. Between Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles, we had different contracts and different, co-terminations and so on. So from that perspective, it helps bring some order to the madness when you're dealing with large budgets and craziness. But like you said, Anna, it has its place. When you're looking for specialization, especially in that very high end of skills, I don't see it play as much of a role. There is definitely a separate angle to how we address that, and that comes through the relationships we have with the companies we're working with. Mm-hmm. And we're happy to bypass it at that point.
Yeah. Any other? Okay, so now I think we're officially ended. So trust me, I'll stay here another 10 minutes. Say, no, we got 10 more minutes. No, really. Thank you so much. Please join us at the breakout session. We're at the Huntington Ballroom North at 10:45. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.